Rain glazed the narrow street of Alder Grove as Ethan Whitlow carried the last box into their new home. The neighborhood was quiet, every lawn trimmed with the same polite precision. From across the fence, a man waved, tall, broad-shouldered, with an immaculately tucked shirt and a smile that reached his eyes but not quite his soul. Daniel Harwood, he introduced, stepping forward with a calm, deliberate ease. "Welcome to the neighborhood." His handshake lingered longer than necessary, firm and cool. Ethan liked him immediately. There was something reassuring about a neighbor who noticed you. Laura, on the other hand, felt a chill when Daniel's gaze shifted to her. "He seems attentive," she whispered later, unpacking dishes in the dim kitchen. "He's just being friendly," Ethan replied, though he caught himself glancing at the window when he said it. Days passed with Daniel appearing everywhere, trimming hedges, offering spare paint cans, collecting mail before Ethan could. Each gesture seemed kind, yet oddly rehearsed, as if he were performing the role of good neighbor for an unseen audience. One afternoon, Ethan tried to return the favor. "Let me buy you a drink sometime," he said. Daniel's grin froze. "I don't really go out. I prefer staying in," he murmured. Laura noticed the hesitation. "You've never seen inside his house, have you?" she asked one evening. Ethan shook his head. Daniel's windows were always curtained, lights dim. Once Ethan glimpsed movement behind the glass, a shadow that wasn't Daniel's build. When he asked about it, Daniel chuckled softly. "Old pipes," he said. "The place makes noises of its own." That night, rain pattered harder against the roof. Ethan couldn't sleep. From their bedroom window, he looked across the street and froze. A faint yellow glow pulsed from Daniel's basement window. A figure, thin, slow, human, moved across the light. When Ethan blinked, the light went out. The rain had stopped, but the silence that followed carried its own weight. For several nights, Ethan tried to forget what he'd seen in Daniel Harwood's basement window. He convinced himself it was the reflection of a streetlight, a passing shape, anything but what it truly felt like. Yet every night when the clock slipped past midnight, the noises began again, a dull scrape like something heavy dragged across concrete. Then a rhythmic thud, precise and patient. Ethan sat upright in bed, holding his breath. The sound came from next door. Laura stirred beside him. "You're doing it again," she whispered. "You're listening?" He didn't answer. The dragging stopped, replaced by a faint hammering. It went on for minutes, then an eerie stillness. Laura sighed and turned over, her voice brittle with sleep. "He's probably fixing something in the basement." But Ethan knew that wasn't the sound of renovation. It was slower, deliberate, and each strike carried an echo of strain. The next night it happened again, and the one after that. A ritual repeating in darkness. On the fourth night, Ethan couldn't take it anymore. He slipped out of bed, wrapped in his dressing gown, and peered through the curtain. Daniel's house was dark except for the faint glimmer beneath the basement door. The hammering had stopped, but something else rose in its place. A whisper. He pressed closer to the window, straining to hear. A woman's voice murmured, broken and pleading. Then a sharp cry ripped through the air, raw and human. Ethan flung open the back door, bare feet sinking into the wet grass. "Daniel?" he called, voice shaking. Only the wind answered. The yard was empty, the basement window dark. A low mechanical hum filled the air, Daniel's generator purring behind the shed, the sound of life in a house that felt dead. Ethan stayed outside until the first blue hint of dawn. When Daniel's truck pulled out later that morning, it gleamed as though freshly washed. Ethan glanced at it from across the hedge, his heart clenching. On the tailgate, catching the early sunlight, was a single muddy handprint. The smell of grilled meat drifted across Alder Grove that Saturday afternoon. Neighbors gathered in the neat cul-de-sac, trading polite laughter and paper plates heavy with food. It was the kind of event meant to feel normal, though Ethan felt anything but. His eyes kept finding Daniel Harwood among the crowd. The man stood alone near the hedge, speaking rarely, smiling too often. Laura nudged Ethan's arm. "Stop staring." "You'll make it obvious," she whispered. Before Ethan could reply, an older couple approached them. "You're the new Whitlows, aren't you?" the woman asked warmly. Her name was Mrs. Penbury, and she'd lived on the street for decades. Daniel must be pleased to have new faces nearby. "Poor man's been alone for years," Ethan caught that last word. Alone? He asked. Mrs. Penbury's smile faltered. He had a partner once. Lovely girl, quiet, always tending to her garden. Then one day, she stopped coming out. Daniel said she moved away to look after her mother. She hesitated, glancing toward Daniel. Funny, no one ever saw her leave. Laura's grip tightened on Ethan's wrist. Enough gossip, she muttered, forcing a small laugh. But the words sank deep. That evening, after the last guest left and the streetlights hummed back to life, Ethan found himself staring out the window again. Daniel's living room curtain was open just enough to show a sliver of the inside. There, on the windowsill, stood a framed photograph. Daniel sat beside a young woman with chestnut hair and haunted eyes. Her smile was fixed, but the tension in her shoulders betrayed it. Ethan leaned closer, pulse quickening. There was something chilling about the way her gaze seemed to follow him even through the glass. He blinked, looked again, and the photograph was gone. The curtain shifted slightly, as though someone had just stepped away. From somewhere inside the house, a single light flickered on. The same faint yellow glow that leaked from the basement window nights before. By Sunday afternoon, Ethan's thoughts had curdled into determination. The photograph, the noises, the vanishing woman. It all circled in his mind like a fever he couldn't break. When Daniel appeared over the fence trimming his roses, Ethan forced a smile and seized his chance. "Daniel, could I borrow a wrench?" "The tap's leaking again," he called. Daniel's expression softened, his eyes calculating before he nodded. "Of course. Come in, I'll fetch it." Ethan stepped through the front door for the first time. The air inside was unnaturally still, carrying the faint scent of bleach and metal. Every surface gleamed. The living room looked like a model home. No clutter, no warmth, not even a coffee ring on the table. He trailed Daniel down a narrow corridor lined with blank white walls. There were no family photos, no paintings, nothing to prove a life had ever been lived there. Only the sound of their footsteps and Daniel's slow, controlled breathing. Then Ethan saw it. Halfway down the hall stood a metal door, thick and industrial, sealed with a heavy padlock on the outside. Scratches marred the paint near the handle, as if someone had clawed at it from within. "What's behind there?" Ethan asked lightly, forcing his tone casual. Daniel didn't look back. "Storage. Old furniture, tools, things I don't use." Ethan nodded, though his gaze stayed fixed on the lock. Odd to have it bolted like that. Daniel turned then, his eyes colder than Ethan had ever seen. "Some things are better kept secure. You shouldn't be wandering." His voice, once friendly, now carried a quiet warning. Ethan mumbled an apology, but his pulse thundered as Daniel handed him the wrench and ushered him out with a polite smile that felt carved from stone. That evening, rain swept through Alder Grove again. Ethan stood by the upstairs window, staring across the street. Through the haze, Daniel emerged from his garage, shoulders hunched against the wind. In his hands, he dragged a long, heavy bundle wrapped tightly in black plastic, leaving a dark streak across the pavement as he disappeared down into the basement. The following week brought no peace. Rainwater streaked the windows of the Whitlow's house, while the lights in Daniel Harwood's basement flickered at strange hours. Ethan barely slept. He caught himself standing by the window long after midnight, waiting, listening. The dragging noises had stopped, but in their place came something worse. Silence broken only by soft, rhythmic murmurs. Laura began waking in a cold sweat. "It's the same dream," she whispered one morning, clutching the duvet. "I'm in that basement. There's a woman crying in the dark, calling for help. Then something pulls her away." Ethan wanted to believe it was coincidence, but the timing gnawed at him. The next night, when the whispers returned, he reached for his phone and began to record. He sat by the open window, every hair on his arm rising. The wind hissed, the rain tapped, and then, through the low hum of the generator eyes came a voice. It was faint, quivering. A woman's voice distorted by distance but unmistakably human. "Please," it said. "Please let me go." Ethan froze. His pulse pounded so loud he feared it would drown out the recording. He played it back twice before showing Laura. She listened in silence, her expression draining of color. When the voice repeated the plea, Laura's breath caught. "Ethan," she whispered. "I've heard that voice before." He frowned. "Where?" She hesitated, her eyes flicking toward the Harwood house. At the barbecue. That photograph in Daniel's window, the woman beside him. I can still hear her voice in my head. It's the same tone, the same fear. The air between them thickened. Ethan felt something cold twist in his stomach. Then she never left, he murmured. Outside, thunder rolled across the horizon, shaking the glass. The light in Daniel's basement blinked once, then vanished. For the first time, Ethan saw movement behind the thin basement window. A shadow, trembling as though pressed against the glass. Laura reached for him, her voice trembling. Ethan, don't, but he had already made up his mind. The morning rain had turned the air sharp and metallic. Ethan waited until Daniel's car disappeared at the end of Alder Grove, its engine fading into the distance. His hands trembled as he gripped the crowbar. Laura's words from the night before echoed through him like a warning bell, but curiosity had already hardened into resolve. He crossed the street, heartbeat sinking with the patter of rain against concrete. The Harwood house loomed silent. Every curtain was drawn. Every window watched him. When he reached the basement door at the back, the padlock stared back. Old, rusted, but strong. One strike, then another. The metal snapped. Ethan hesitated, breath misting in the cold, before easing the door open. The smell hit first, a mixture of bleach, damp, and something foul underneath, like decay forced into silence. He flicked on the light. The bulb buzzed weakly, casting a jittery glow across the room. The basement was larger than he expected. Concrete walls lined with shelves, jars, and tools neatly arranged in perfect order. But one wall stood apart, plastered with photographs. Dozens of them. Each picture showed a different family who had lived on Alder Grove. Smiling faces. Children on bicycles. Couples in front of their homes. And in every photograph, Daniel stood in the background, sometimes half hidden, sometimes staring directly into the lens. Ethan's skin prickled. A faint rustle came from the far corner. A mound beneath a tarp shifted slightly, the plastic rippling. His heart climbed into his throat. He took a step closer, each footfall echoing like a drumbeat. Please, he whispered, gripping the edge of the tarp. He yanked it back. Instead of a body, a video camera stared up at him. Its red recording light blinked once, steady and cruel. Ethan pressed play. The small screen flickered to life, revealing a familiar bedroom. His bedroom. Laura lay asleep under their sheets, her chest rising softly. A figure stood at the foot of the bed, breathing. Watching. The camera panned closer. Laura. Ethan breathed. Voice cracking. A new sound filled the basement. Footsteps behind him. Daniel's voice came low, calm, and venomous. You shouldn't have seen that. The concrete floor bit into Ethan's knees where Daniel had shoved him, ropes biting into his wrists. The basement felt impossibly cold. The small camera blinked from across the room, recording every terrified blink, every hitch of his breathing. Daniel stood over him, hands clasped behind his back, expression unreadable. You've been blind, Ethan. Completely blind, he said quietly, voice precise as if every word were calculated. What are you talking about? Ethan demanded, straining against the ropes. Daniel gestured toward the wall of photographs. You think I'm the only one with secrets? You think your wife is innocent? Watch. He pressed a button on a battered VHS player. The screen flickered, showing Laura, Ethan's Laura, meeting Daniel in a park, her eyes brimming with tears. She clutched his arm, whispered something hurried, trembling. The footage changed. In another shot, they were in a quiet cafe, heads bowed close together, lips brushing, laughter low and anxious. She came to me, Daniel said, pacing, begging me to protect her from you, from everything she feared you could do when she told the truth. Do you understand? I saved her from you, from yourself. Ethan's stomach nodded. Denial and fury collided inside him. You're lying. She never... Look at the tapes. Daniel snapped, and the screen showed Laura alone, sobbing into a handkerchief. The camera lingered. Her fear was real, her desperation tangible. I didn't want to hurt you, Ethan, but you should have known. She needed someone she could trust. Ethan's mind reeled. Confusion, betrayal, horror, all twisted together. Every memory of Laura now had a new, unbearable weight. Daniel's eyes were sharp, almost pleading, but the obsession beneath them made the truth unbearable. Both men were claiming they were protecting her. Yet the tape suggested something far darker. A story tangled with fear and lies. The lights flickered, and Ethan thought he heard a faint siren wailing in the distance. Daniel's jaw tightened. Do you hear that? Someone has called them. You won't leave here before the police arrive. Both men froze as the sound grew louder, echoing off the concrete walls. Their eyes locked. The horror of what had been done and what was about to be discovered mirrored perfectly in each other's gaze.